Good evening, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. I hope you're doing very well tonight, and we're going to do just a few more MH2 spoilers, maybe the stragglers, right? The ones that I haven't quite managed to cover yet. Now, the set's already out. What am I doing still making these spoiler videos? Isn't it too late? No, it's not too late. It's definitely not. Listen, the ramifications, the ripple effects of Modern Horizons 2 will be felt down the eons, okay? So on the grand timeline of Modern, what's a couple days, right? What's a couple days between friends? And we'll try to keep this one relatively brief because Obsidian Charmaw's use cases are obvious, and also a lot of the things that I have to say about Obsidian Charmaw, I have also said about Break the Ice in that video, right? Because there are some overlaps, but there are some important distinctions as well. Obsidian Charmaw, and before I tell you what it does, just keep this in mind. There is an old adage against our ancient enemy of Tron, or indeed of big mana in general, that you can disrupt all you want, and you should, and you have to have a chance. But unless you're also laying down a savage clock, or at least a decent clock, you're probably not getting there anyway. You are just going to be sweating every top deck. The game's going to go on for too long. They're going to find a way back in. So Obsidian Charmaw conceptually is desirable, even though we have a lot of other good anti-big mana options, because it's land destruction and it is a clock. Just keep that in mind this entire video. Anyway, Obsidian Charmaw is a dragon, a 5-drop 4/4 flying dragon to be exact, which is a very typical dragon kind of baseline build, right? We've seen that a lot, and it's 3 generic and 2 red. However, the cost is not fixed. This spell costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each land your opponents control that could produce colorless. And when Obsidian Charmaw enters the battlefield, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. So we've got an ETB that is an activated ability of Fulminator Mage. And we have, obviously, a track record, basically as long as Modern has been around, that effect is worth 3 mana for mid-range players, whatever your preference. We've got Pillage now. People have played Stone Rain, actually, in the past to accommodate the mana more easily in Jund before red became more than a splash color, excuse me. And we've got all kinds of variants. We've got Rain of Tears and Luris build, the list goes on. But we know how 3 mana blow up a land is often good enough against big mana decks. In fact, that's often exactly what we need. And Obsidian Charmaw is 3 mana blow up a land when cast on curve against decks where all the lands can produce colorless. Again, Tron is the foremost example of this. So if you are on the play, Obsidian Charmaw's ceiling is higher than any other anti-big mana card by far, because your opponent has played a couple Tron lands, and you, untap, play that 3rd land, you better have fetched a double red, otherwise you're going to be kicking yourself, and then boom, ETB, blow up a land, deploy a 4/4 with flying. That is absolutely the highest ceiling that we have against Tron decks. There's just no two ways about it. It is absolutely off the charts powerful. Now, one thing I do want to point out is Break the Ice. This was mentioned by one of my patrons, shout out to Vladislav Jurenka, in my Break the Ice video, who made a really good observation, pointed out that Break the Ice can actually be enabled by Damping Sphere. So Damping Sphere, and this is relevant not only against Tron, it of course slows Tron down, but also against Amulet Titan with the Karoo lands, the bounce lands. We can slow those down already with Damping Sphere. Damping Sphere is a decent role player against those decks for sure. But Damping Sphere also is going to make, for example, those Amulet Titan bounce lands produce colorless. So it not only slows them down, stops them from being so explosive, and stops them from accessing colors, it also makes them targets for Break the Ice, whereas otherwise they would not be. That's actually very, very cool, because now these two cards not only overlap in different ways, which is good, number one, because you can't have too much hate against big mana when you're facing it, and number two, because they require different answers from the opponents, right? Break the Ice maybe needs Veil of Summer or Permission to be beaten, whereas Damping Sphere, they need some kind of Nature's Claim style effect. So, number one, there's like redundancy in a good way. Number two, there's difference in terms of what the opponent needs to compete with them. And then number three, they enable each other. Damping Sphere, again, enables Break the Ice, gives it more targets. In the same exact ways as Damping Sphere synergizes with Break the Ice, it also synergizes with Obsidian Charmaw. And in fact, maybe it synergizes that slight bit more. Because Obsidian Charmaw never really going to come down naturally earlier than turn 3 unless you're ramping it out. More on that in a minute. And also, as good as Break the Ice and D-Sphere both are individually and together, neither of them advances your clock. So Obsidian Charmaw opens up an entire new avenue of attack. And that's definitely something to note. So Obsidian Charmaw, my point by saying that is so you know how that works, but also it's not only an anti-Tron card, right? We talked in the Break the Ice video about all the other decks it could potentially come in against, Amulet Titan on that list. Turns out it's even better against Titan than I had realized if you have Damping Sphere in your sideboard as well. Now, obviously, there's an upper limit on how many big mana hate cards you can have in your sideboard, but that's why it's important to really run a fine-toothed comb over all of our options, because you can maybe say, okay, I want one Damping Sphere as a turn 2 play against big mana, as an anti-combo card, as something that can slow down Cascade decks or be part of my prowess plan. That all depends on what exactly your strategy is, but you understand the point. And then if that Damping Sphere is in your side, a card like Obsidian Charmaw gets better and gets maybe more desirable proportionately than, for example, Pillage would. It's all a matter of nuance and of synergy and of the broad metagame, so it's important to keep all of our options in mind. Now, Obsidian Charmaw loves Damping Sphere. It's its favorite trinket, right? We know dragons love their relics, their hoard of shiny things, but Obsidian Charmaw has IRL friends too. And you know what? I think Obsidian Charmaw's best friend just might be Iggy, aka the Ignoble Hierarch. Why is that? Well, if you thought it was good turn 3, how about a turn 2 Fulminator Mage that leaves a 4/4 flyer behind? I think that's very, very, very good against any big mana deck, assuming they're showing you at least one land that can produce colorless. And as if that was not good enough, Ignoble Hierarch's Exalted, highly relevant, notably making Charmaw alone a 4-turn clock that is also evasive. Totally and completely insane. And whenever we mention Ignoble Hierarch, we should probably mention Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, who can ramp as well, although does not provide as consistent of ramp because he does need to connect and not simply untap, and also doesn't provide Exalted. It's still obviously fantastic to get turn 2 Obsidian Charmaw. I think we'll live without the Exalted, right? I think that's still usually going to be a game-winning play. And on top of that, you can get up to Ragavan shenanigans, and whenever you are able to cast big mana payoffs against them, that is just kind of hilarious, maybe insult to injury, or maybe a genuine way to close out the game. Now, to close out this video, how about we talk a little bit more about the fringe decks that I mentioned in the Break the Ice video. You've got maybe your tribal decks that play utility lands like Mutavault and Cavern of Souls. They can have a surprising number of colorless producing lands overall. We talked about like Eldrazi and Taxes that plays the pain lands. The list goes on. I won't go over all of that again here, but I will say that if you were kind of maybe borderline about bringing in Break the Ice against matches like that, I understand why. I mention it there more for the sake of completion than anything else. But if you're actually thinking that like the land destruction plan, or at least setting them off curve by throwing a land destruction effect out there or two, isn't bad, I just don't know if I want to risk it having, no board presence off of Break the Ice if it's not game winning, well, Obsidian Charmaw is more of the best of both worlds. Again, it doesn't come down as quickly without any help, but it does leave a 4/4 flyer behind, and obviously, against any deck winning trying to turn creatures sideways, that could be a very nice body on the field as well. Again, you can just regard this in that matchup as a tempo play, right? You can get this out maybe for 3 or for 4 mana. If for a 4/4 flyer, that's not bad, and you get to set him back on a land while you're doing so. Really not bad. So Obsidian Charmaw, very strong hate against Greentron and Eldrazi-tron. Some nice synergy with Damping Sphere. Some very nice synergy with Ignoble Hierarch as well. And probably more flexible and more broadly useful than it at first appears to be. So there's a lot going on here. Really pushed card, but also probably quite still a little bit narrow. just enough so it's not going to be perhaps main deckable in Panza, right? If it was a little less narrow and was able to be more main deckable in Panza, then we might have a problem on our hands. Then we might have a card that could oppress Modern in a much more wide-ranging sense. As it is, I just think it's kind of a very powerful tool for the job. So let me know, my friends, what you think about this dragon, and I'll see you in the comments below. See you for a couple more spoiler videos, and a reminder that we'll be playing MH2 Jund before more than a few days have gone. I hope to see you for all of that. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.